Hello everyone, in this guide I will show you a very powerful mechanist build that you can use for all PvE content, whether it's solo stuff like working on masteries, hero points and collections, or group content like metas, strike missions, fractals and raids. The build offers very high sustain and very high damage, while providing lots of boons including a very high uptime of Alacrity. And at the end, I will show you how you can use this build as a very high DPS for group content, and also how you can use it as Alacrity DPS Support build. All of this with just few changes. So with this setup, you will have a very versatile build that you can fill multiple roles with, and it will be very effective and efficient in all of them. I will now show you the main gear setup for this build, and in the description below, I will leave other options that will be cheaper and easier for you to get if needed. For the armor, we are using a full set of Viper armor with Trapper runes, Viper mace and pistol with Sigil of Earth on the mace and Sigil of Bursting on the pistol, and the order of the sigils here is important, so try to keep them this way. And then you will also have an extra pistol with Sigil of Earth on it in case you will need it, as I will explain later. For the trinkets, we will have a full set of Celestial, and we will use Relic of Akim. For the consumables, we will use Koi Cake and Magnanimous Tuning Crystals. I made plenty of guides that shows you how to gear up any character from scratch, including Ascended Trinkets and Relics. You will find the links for them also in the description below. Now let's explain how this build works. Most of your sustain will come from the alchemy trait line. Iron Blooded will reduce the damage and condition damage you take by 2% for each boon you will have. And with this build setup, you will find yourself applying tons of boons, which will help a lot with damage reduction from this trait. This will also work very well with compounding chemicals because it will heal you every time you apply boons to yourself. On top of that, health insurance will increase the incoming heals you will get even from yourself. When you cleanse conditions, you will apply regeneration, and you will do that from your F2 skill on your mech. This will also give you protection, which will reduce your damage even further. You will also apply regeneration and barrier from your mace too. Barrier Signet will reduce the damage and condition damage by 10% when we leave it on passive, and your healing Signet will keep giving you heals every second. So both of them will work very well with the rest of the build setup. Also, the Grandmaster trait in the Mechanist trait line will apply barrier every few seconds from your mech, and it will make your F3 skill, when you use it, it will apply barrier every second. And from this trait, when you apply barrier, this will also apply Alacrity. And it will also make your F2 apply Alacrity on top of the other boons we mentioned earlier. So you will find those two skills and those two traits work together very well. They will provide a lot of barrier and a lot of Alacrity, and they will also help with sustain because of the other traits. As for the damage, most of it will come from firearms. From Sharpshooter, you will have 33% chance to apply bleeding on your critical hits. You will also get extra 120 condition damage from chemical rounds, and your pistol skills will have their conditions applied increased by 33%, which is very good, especially because of the burning you will apply from skill 4. You will also have an extra 15% critical chance when you're hitting enemies that will have bleeding. And also, your bleeding will have an increased duration of 33%. So those three traits will work together very well, and they will apply a lot of bleeding on your enemies. The Grandmaster trait is going to give you a 33% chance to apply burning when you critically hit an enemy, and it will increase the duration of your burning by 33%. And burning will be one of the strongest sources of damage you will have in this build. And also from this trait, you will apply extra might every second, and your F3 skill will also apply might and fury. So you will find yourself running with very high stacks of might, which will also significantly increase your damage. We also have few more very useful traits. From this one, anytime you use your healing skill, you will remove 3 conditions and convert them into boons. And from this trait in the Mechanist, we are going to have our regeneration apply extra healing by 20%. And with this build setup, you will find yourself with very high uptime of regeneration. Your healing Signet, Shift Signet, and Barrier Signet will always remain on passive. Healing Signet will give you heals every second, as I mentioned earlier. Shift Signet will share the boons you have with your mech, which will make it much stronger, and it will also give it a lot of Alacrity, so it will reduce the cooldown on your F skills. It can also be activated to use as a stun break if you ever needed that, and you can also use it as a teleport. But otherwise, always leave it on passive because it will be very useful. We already mentioned how useful Barrier Signet is on passive, but when you activate it, It will reflect projectiles from this dome, and it will also give you a barrier every second, which will help a lot with sustain. So when you find yourself under a lot of pressure and you want some extra sustain, you can activate the signet. Otherwise, always leave it on passive. As for your superconducting signet, this is something you will use anytime it's available on the enemies. This will apply tons of conditions on them, including a lot of burning. And your elite signet will be very useful whether it's passive or active. When you leave it on passive, it will reduce the cooldown on any of the signets that you have used by 20%. And when you activate it, your mech will fire a beam like this that will pierce through enemies, and it will apply a lot of damage and burning. But you will leave the signet on passive most of the time, and you will only activate it when you are fighting champions and bounties and hero points, for example. Now let's explain how to use this build. The first thing you should know is that you can make your mech F skills work on auto attack, and in that case the mech will use them on his own anytime they are available. You can do that by doing Control right click. When you see an arrow around the skill like this, then the mech will use it anytime it's available on his own, but when it doesn't have an arrow, then you will need to activate it yourself. When you start the fight, you will use Pistol 5, which will cripple and immobilize your enemies, so they will not be able to escape your bomb, but also it will do a very decent amount of damage. And then you will basically follow up with the rest of your skills 2, 3, and 4. This will give you a lot of barrier, vigor, and regeneration, and it will also apply a lot of conditions and damage to the enemies. After that, you are going to use your superconducting signet, and you will leave your elite on passive and you will not use it. Also keep in mind that you can use your signet to bring your mech back if he ever died. You will always leave barrier signet on passive, and you will only ever use it if you are struggling with sustain and you need the extra barrier it will provide. And the same thing with your healing signet, always leave it on passive and only use it if you ever needed heals. And don't forget that from this trait it will also remove 3 conditions and convert them to boons, so you can also use it as a source of cleanses if you need it. Pistol is there for 2 reasons. The first one is if you are fighting enemies where you need to range and you can't melee. In that case, all of your pistol skills will work from range and all of them will be very good, and you can just spam them whenever they are off cooldown. This will also be very good later when I show you the DPS version of the build where you can use in-group content, because it will rely on pistol. But if you will not use it for DPS in-group content, then that pistol can be a very cheap weapon because you will not use it often. Most of the time you will rely on mace. If you found yourself struggling with sustain, you can remove superconducting signet, and from here we have multiple options based on your needs. Elixir U can be used as another source of stun break and also stability if needed. We can also use Elixir S, and this will make you shrink like this, and it will make you invulnerable for a few seconds. But just notice that when you use it, you can't use anything else, so you can use this as your last source of escape. And this is also a stun break. Elixir C can also be used if you are struggling with conditions. This is a very good source of cleanses. Battering Ram is a very powerful skill for CCs, and it will give you 2 charges. And the last option here is Throw Mine if you needed some boon strips, because this will remove 3 boons and it will also do a decent damage, and it have a very low cooldown. This will also stun, so you can use it as another source of CCs. I have another guide that will include some tips on how to improve any build, including this one, in open world. You will find the link for that guide in the description below. As I mentioned at the beginning, this build is very versatile and you can play multiple roles with it. So now I will show you how you can use this build as an Alacrity DPS, which can be very useful for group content like fractals, strikes, and raids. And then I will also show you how you can use it as pure Condi DPS that will do tons of damage. For firearms, we will leave it as 1, 1, 3, and then we will have explosives as our second trait line. We will go 3, 1, 3, and mechanist will be 2, 2, 2. For the utility skills here, we will have pretty much the same setup, all signets. So you will have the healing signet and the elite one, and then you have shift with superconducting and barrier signets. For the gear, we will not really change anything. The only exception will be the relic. If you want to do a little bit more damage for group content, then you will need a relic of the fractal. The main difference will be in the consumables. We will have Plate of Eggs Benedict to give us concentration and expertise, and we will also use Magnanimous Maintenance Oil. This will give you enough wound duration to keep up Alacrity 100% of the time. There are basically 4 skills that you need to use all the time to make this build effective. You will have your F2 and your F3 on your mech, which remember you can make them work as auto attack, so you don't even need to worry about them. And then you have your Mace 2, which will apply some barrier, and it will also give regeneration and vigor. And then you will have Barrier Signet, which will apply barrier with every pulse, and this will work very well with those 2 traits because you will then apply Alacrity from your barrier. Just by simply using those 4 skills I just just mentioned, you will be able to apply 100% Alacrity and many other boons. But if you also use your Mace 3 and your Pistol 4, just basically like I explained earlier, you are going to do a lot more damage. Now I will show you how to work with this build as a Condi DPS build that will do very high damage. For the traits, we will change firearms and we will make it 1, 2, 3, and then we will have explosives again. That will be 3, 1, 3, and Mechanist will be 1, 1, 1. For the utility skills, we will also have full signets again, but this time the third signet will be Force instead of Barrier. And to maximize your damage, you want to have Pistol Pistol. And remember that if you will have a second pistol, it will also be Viper, and you will have Sigil of Earth in it. On the second pistol, you will have Sigil of Birthing, and it will also be Viper. And you will try to change your trinkets to Viper instead of Celestial. If that was too hard, don't worry, I tried this build using Celestial trinkets, and it still did a very decent amount of damage. And if you really want to maximize your damage, I would highly recommend Relic of Fractal. This is one of the relics that you can only get if you have the latest expansion, Secrets of the Obscure, and I will also leave a link in the description below that explains everything about the new relic system. For our consumables, we will use Plate of Fire Flank Stake, which will give us some power and condition damage, and we will use Writ of Land Malice as our utility consumable. Or, if you can afford it and you want to do even more damage, then you should have the Writ of Masterful Malice, which will give you even more condition damage. All of the changes I just explained will increase your damage significantly. Thermal Vision will give you an extra 150 expertise, and so with this setup, you will find yourself at 100% condition duration for bleeding and burning, which are the two most important conditions you will do. And in explosives, we have Glass Cannon will increase our strike damage by 10% as long as your health is above 75%. And that should be the case most of the time in group content because you will have dedicated healers with you. And then from the aim assisted rocket rate, you are going to do an extra attack that will also do some decent damage every 3 seconds. Shaped Charge will increase your strike damage by a further 0.5% for each stacks of vulnerability. So basically at the maximum 25 stacks of vulnerability, you will do an extra 12.5% extra strike damage. And then from the Big Boom trait, you will do an extra 15% strike damage to enemies that will have lower health than you, which again should be most of the time in group content. And from the Mechanist trait line, we have the Edge Cutters will help you do a lot more bleeding, which will significantly increase your damage. Also, your mech will get 100% of your condition damage and expertise, which will help it do a lot more damage, and it will make your F2 skills apply a lot of conditions. And the Force Signet is something we will also leave on passive that will increase our strike damage by 10%. The rotation for this build is very simple. You will basically leave all your signets on passive. The only one you will use will be your elite, and you will do that anytime it is available. You will also have all your mixed skills F1, F2 and F3 on auto attack, so you don't have to worry about them. And you will just spam your Pistol 2, Pistol 3 and Pistol 4. I hope you enjoyed this build when you try it as much as I enjoyed working on it. And if you want to check more of my build guides, I will leave a link for the playlist below in the description. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel to see more build guides in the future. And if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below and I will get back to you as soon as possible. I will now leave you with some footage for this build in action with all the variants I just mentioned. Thank you very much for watching and I will see you in the next guide.